This is my video on why welfare is a toxic trap. I'm going to discuss my experience and in general about welfare. Um, what I'm going to start with is that when I was 15 to 18 years old, that was the first time I was on welfare. My parents split up and my mother became a single mom and she didn't have a lot of work experience. Well, we had to end up waiting about a year to get HUD housing. And within that year, all my sisters were split up. My older sister, a couple years older, she got a roommate. I had to go in with my mother's cousin and stay there with them. And my younger sister had to go all the way to California to stay with my uncle and his wife and our cousin there. And my youngest sister stayed with my mom at my grandmother's house because she was, pretty young at the time. So, because of that, we were all split up, and it just had happened after we experienced, this split up with our parents. Because we were split up, it kind of caused me to end up going to a few different high schools. I think in that time period, it was probably about 3 different high schools. Total was 5 that I've been to. One was a homeschool online, and then I went to one with my uncle's house, and then one at my grandmother's house, and then finally when we did get HUD housing. And then finally the last school I went to was the private school I went to in order to graduate because I got put back so much, not earning credits. I was also an A honor roll student. I took honor classes and AP classes, but when you move so much and you don't finish these credits, they won't add up in high school. So I had a lot of issues with that, and that's why I ended up going to a private school in order to graduate. I was like a year behind people. I also started working full time when I was 16 years old. I first had a job at McDonald's, and then I ended up getting one at Walgreens. For both of them, I rode my bicycle. McDonald's was not very far, but riding my bike to Walgreens was pretty far. I rode it was about 2 miles. At nighttime, I would just put it in the car, and my mom would have picked me up, with her car. So I would often go to school all day, have like about an hour or so, and then, have to get ready to go to work and ride my bike all the way there before my mother came home and, do some chores and stuff like that. Well, my mom didn't want to stay in this place that we were in, so she didn't want to stay on a low income. She wanted to get off of it, so we could eventually move up. And I was working full time, as I said, and my mother decided to go back to school. So she went back to school to get, certified in accounting and, not accounting specifically, but clerical work. Um, and it took a while for her to even start finding jobs. And when she did find a job, she got about $2 or $3 an hour more. So it wasn't significant, but it was pretty good. And the problem that happened is when you get a raise, they begin to take away benefits. And now they usually, you'd think that they would even out, and they were only going to take away, from what you had before. And even if they did do that, you're not really moving forward. But that's not what happens. It's worse than that because you have these different programs that do different things. So we talk about HUD housing, the rent gets raised when you get your raise. And then you get less SNAP benefits. It can be pretty significant, like saying you're going from 600 to maybe 423 this month. And then you also have other ones that may come to play as well. But the point being is, like, once you get this raise, you're trying to move forward in your life, and you still can't get out of HUD housing because you're still stuck. You're still stuck not making enough to get out of it because you're at that point, once they took some of their benefits away, a lot of the time you're worse off than when you were making minimum wage. And this is how welfare incentivizes people to be poor. And a lot of people say, well, people are lazy, they don't want to work. Sure, after a while, what's the point? What's the point of, you go to school, you work hard, you're trying to move forward, you see all these little commercials like, I'm a single parent, I went back to school. It's not that simple, because you get this, raise, and everything gets taken away, and you're literally making less. Like, you're struggling more than when you had your benefits. And you're not even talking about maybe Medicare has changed. Maybe you have more to pay for that. Like, there's a bunch of different things that get calculated differently. It's not one big thing altogether. So you end up living paycheck to paycheck while you're on welfare. Like we said, either when you're on the food stamps, or when you're on the food stamps and your benefits are decently high, or when you get a raise and they drop down, you're still living paycheck to paycheck. So things just build up, issues build up. Like, you need a car repair, and then you get that car repair, and then something goes wrong, because the timing is you never have money. You never have money. It can be really devastating, because you're in constant fear of, like, losing your car, then losing your job, and then becoming homeless. It's a real fear, because you don't have much to fall back on. Now, there's some people have family. We were in the situation where I was 16 years old, and I had a 4-year younger than me sister, and then another year one that was much younger than me, and my mother living in HUD housing. And we didn't really have anybody to help us at all. And there was a lot of constant fear. I had to help with food. I had to help with clothes and gas, all kinds of stuff. In the middle of all that, you have to think about and remember all the different benefits that you have to update your information, or redo it, re-register, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's the beginning of the school year even. It all depends on how long you've been in that one area. And if you move, a lot of things are crazy. And sometimes in HUD housing, they move you around, especially like after I moved out, my 2 younger sisters couldn't stay in a certain room amount in HUD housing, so they would move too. And because I was helping out and, working a full-time job and going to school full-time, and when I say full-time job, that was like over at least 35 hours or more. And I would go to school all day, and then I'd probably be at work till like 11, and then I'd be up till like 1 doing some homework. And it wasn't every weekday, but if I wasn't on that weekday, I was sleeping. And I still had chores to do, and take my sisters here or there, or do something. It was not any rest. I just remember being so exhausted. And I'm not that social, but I couldn't even have a social life at all. I was just tired all the time, or just trying to, wind down. And like I said, I was frustrated. I get increasingly frustrated, because as you get older and you get closer to 18, and you're working your butt off, and you don't have anything to show for it, because all these years you've been working hard to ensure you take care of your family, and there was no place to save. No matter how many times I tried, I would save, and then something would come up. So there was really no way to save. I didn't even have a car right away. Fast forward till later. I was on welfare again after getting out of the Army. I ended up becoming a single parent myself. I was first on welfare in New York as an adult, and the process was decent. Um, we got a good amount, you know. I didn't even have that many bills or anything, and I still got a decent amount. And it was enough where I had enough money and enough for food, and it was fine. Um, then I got a job at Walmart for like a month, and almost everything got taken. Like we went from 500 to I think it had to be like 80 or $100, maybe 120. I don't remember, but it was a significant drop, and I was getting minimum wage, but with the gas that I had to spend driving 45 minutes to work, you know, contributing to this household and everything, there was not a lot of ways to save. I ended up having to wait for my first tax return, I think, um, to be able to get out of there. And so I eventually moved to Texas. And I was unable to work for a while after I got out of the army. I tried to go back to school a few times to make some more income. And between that time, my health had got really bad, and I wasn't working at all for a little while. At that time, I did apply for benefits in Texas, and I needed my daughter to at least go to daycare twice a week. So I was paying for daycare twice a week. And I still ended up getting some benefits, but it was so low, and the ratio is completely different. And so I'm curious and I look into it, and it really depends on your area. So if you have a bigger population, that means you have a bigger population of poor people, and there's a priority. Um, so you're going to have significantly less in some states versus others, and it's not necessarily due to the inflation, not the inflation, but the higher prices in another state. It doesn't really even out that way either. So I was a little disappointed with that. Their system was very good though here in Texas. It was pretty streamlined. I could say that much. And I still was able to get WIC for a little bit. And I do like WIC, and I wish it was the same all over. I had good experiences with it. Um, so I'm going to go back to welfare being a toxic trap here. Um, People complain about laziness and dependence, and I just want to say the system incentivizes people, um, because there's the problem with welfare is there is a lack of proper transitioning out of welfare, and a lot of the time you have to have another adult working with you, and you both get decent jobs eventually, or you get in a relationship, or you have extra family. But other than that, it's not really easy to get out. It's not easy to transition off of welfare. So people give up, and they give up because they keep trying, and they're not going anywhere. They're just spinning their wheels. The rent was also raised when I turned 18. It was raised about three and a half the times it normally was. And so I turn 18, and we have to pay more than before. And I was already paying, helping my mother out. And I ended up getting a flat myself because of that. I refused to pay and stay in HUD housing. I might as well get my own little place. But when I got that place, I had to work 2 jobs, and I still barely made it a month. There are cycles in the family, though, when it comes to poverty. Poverty has a deep effect on people. So we talked about me going to high school. That changed a lot in my life. It held me back a lot going to 5 different high schools. And having to work, I couldn't do extracurricular. Even if I had a good GPA, I think I maintained a decent, really decent GPA. I had no time to think about college. I was just surviving and still surviving and still surviving until I joined the army. And of course, that wasn't easy. It was stable though. So, because you're helping your family, and this is a cycle, it's hard to build wealth when you're in poverty for this very reason right here. Because poverty is the opposite cycle of building wealth. It keeps either you keep reducing it and you're just stuck, or you're just stuck because the same cycle repeats itself. So, your parent has trouble because their parents had trouble, and then now you have to help, and now that you're helping, you're going to get set back too. And we're going to talk about how that looks. So you're less able to go to college or vocational school if you're still helping your family. Sometimes people do up till 24, 25. And say it's a disabled parent, that can be even longer. You're less able to get volunteer hours that helps you with universities and extracurriculars. You're less able to maintain friends, physical and mental health. I mean, both were very bad at my age. I was at an age that I didn't even know what all that stuff was. I just felt horrible. Um, I was less able to focus in school for sure. Like, to be honest with you, um, the education system where I was at is not that decent. And I had gone to some better schools. So it was easy for me. Um, and lucky for me, I was able to get good grades for that reason. I have a lot more chores. There was a lot of cleaning the house, doing dishes, um, doing a lot of different things, including having to take my younger sisters places. Take them to the park, take them to go get clothes, go shopping, all kinds of stuff. Um, as I said, I was unable to save anything for myself. Anything. Like, it was impossible. It was impossible. You know, it, I mean, even if you have the money and you don't want to tell your parent, what are you going to do? Because it's going to be a situation where you need it to get done, or else it's going to affect you badly. And so you just don't save because you still have to contribute if an issue arises. So I wasn't able to be an adult with a car. Um, it was a struggle to move out and to have any backup income at all. I was unable to seek mentors easily because I was working so much and going to school. I was unable to build any wealth, as I said, get credit or invest in anything. It's easier to be manipulated sometimes when you're on welfare. There are predators that will try to use you, and or friends or family. Um, and you can get stuck in toxic relationships because of where you are financially. I mean, you're already stuck financially, but then say you're in a toxic relationship and you're stuck financially. How do you get out of that? I'm going to get into a few more. Um, but I'm going to quote something my youngest sister said. My youngest sister was on welfare a lot longer than it was pretty much most of her life. She was about 2 years old when she got on it, and 16. So we're talking about 14 years. It's crazy even thinking about it. And this is what she says. Having a single mom can create a sense of fear, depression in their children by seeing their parents struggle and have less hope for the future. Toxic family cycles, toxic family cycles, and toxic poverty cycles. It is a cycle that keeps going. because and it could get worse. It's like being right on the cliff. Some people are just so close to homelessness and they're working their butt off trying, and there's not really any wiggle room. Go back to school is not easy for everybody. If it's paying for daycare and paying for this and seeing if this program is going to support you, if not. And a lot of the time you're stuck. You're stuck in that, what I say, financial loophole where you make just a bit over, but then you're still kind of poor. So you really can't afford it by yourself either. There needs to be a name for that in between spot right there. It's a terrible spot to be in. Well, you get an increase in family violence and stress, um, a bunch of untreated mental and physical health issues. So it's a very chaotic life when you're on welfare, when your family has to work their butt off, when everybody's taking care of each other, when, things keep going wrong, and you're just in constant fear. There's a codependent mentality that you begin to absorb because you have so little that you have to depend on people so much that you develop this mentality and it stays with you for a while. And it's something that you pass on to your children. Even, hey, I had my kids in my 20s and I was like, hey, that stuff is behind me. It was not behind me. It creeps up on you. There's more danger and crime. Sometimes had housing is a good area, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're just getting food stamps, but likely, you're in a low income area when there's usually increased crime or increased danger. When I was living in one of my apartments on my own, I was a waitress and I had cash in my pocket. And I would come home to these letters on my door saying that I need to be careful because somebody got robbed the other day. And that would happen like every other few weeks. And I was single by myself and I was scared. And you have break-ins and assaults and stuff like that. Thank God I haven't had to experience that. There's police issues, gun violence, all kinds of problems. And then there's a lot of legal things that when you're so poor, you can't move forward in so many ways because of legal things. So you can't, if your job is treating you like crap, you don't have time and you don't have money. If, say somebody wronged you, you don't have money to do that, to help that. Say you need to get child support or alimony. You need a lot of money to do that. And free lawyers and free law help. It's really complicated. A lot of the times you have to miss a whole day's work just for almost all these programs. Okay, you're already poor and you have to work your butt off. For almost all these programs, when you're going to apply for them or you're updating them, you're missing work to do it. I mean, these things are not like I go in for a second. It's like almost like, okay, everybody knows the DMV. It's like going in the DV. You're going to be there all day. That's what it's like. My welfare story. My parents split up, as I said. Our dad abandoned us. My mother applied for her housing. As I said, it took a while. Went to the 5 different high schools and then split our family apart. I started working at 16, initially at McDonald's, and then I moved to Walgreens. And as I mentioned, my mother went back to school, but it didn't really help. She tried to get a job eventually when she got one, and, we just were worse off than when we were on benefits. So we moved back to a lower wage job because it was hard to afford food and gas, and the rent was higher, and both of us working wasn't enough. it was not enough. Like, we were still just always making it. So I also mentioned in 2015 I was on in New York, and I was also on it in Texas. Currently, when I started working part-time after I got out of the Army, I couldn't work for a few years. And eventually I started working part-time, and I had VA money. I was literally like $150, $200 over the limit. And when you're in that situation, it's really frustrating because you know you're worse off than when you're on benefits. And it's so weird. It's like incentivizing me to not have a job, because now that I have a job, I get so much taken away from me that this job is actually putting me in the negative and health wise. It doesn't help me. It makes it worse because you got to include taxes, Social Security, Medicare taken out on my check. Because when you're not on assistance, there's not a lot of special things available that some people don't think of. School lunch is a big deal. It's a lot of extra money just to have a school lunch for the kids, to make one. And holiday help, like with Christmas and stuff like that, they usually want to see that you're on a program. Same thing for school supplies. Lucky for me, some people in my community help me. I also tried to get a VA increase because of all these things, obviously, I struggled to go back to work. I struggled to do too many classes. I'm struggling right now in work. I honestly know that I should have been working just mostly on my recovery, but I didn't have that opportunity. And so, the whole time, I was sought out more income for that reason, especially having kids to take care of. But I ended up working on a VA increase for almost 2.5 years, I think. And it come to find out, like near the end, I did not even get a second eval because my doctor wasn't writing notes. And I guess I should have checked earlier, but I didn't realize that that's what happened. I kept going back to the VSO, and asking for specific increases, and it would just, nothing would really happen. And one of the VSOs was like, "Hey, is your doctor writing notes in your file?" And I was like, "I don't know." So I went to go check, and there wasn't really much there. And so in the process, they have to look and see if the doctor's saying something's wrong first, even if you have MRIs and stuff. So getting out and trying to get an increase, you got to learn this whole different freaking system that is rocket science level stuff. Let me tell you, you can find some pages where they go in some details about, how much you can move your hand and limitations, and it's crazy. I also tried to get Social Security. I called around to a lot of different places, and even with my pretty high percentage of VA income and multitude of more than 2 or 3 injuries, a lot of them didn't want to accept me because I was only, I'm only 30 years old. So it took me a while, and I finally found a place, but then I ended up having to drop the case. I was getting really close, but I had to drop it because I had to go back to work for my kids. Oh my God. I went on and on. I'm probably going to have to go here. But last but not least, what would you do? How would $1,000 have helped us? How would $1,000 have helped my family? Wow. My mother would have started off with $1,000 a month. We wouldn't have had maybe $400 or $500 in food stamps, but we'd have an extra $500. I mean, that's a ton. That's your car breaking and you not having to freak out. That's money that you can actually save over all the years that we've been in there. It would have definitely been helpful. And then in a couple more years, I would have turned 18. And when I turned to 18, I would have got the $1,000 a month. And the amount they raised the rent wouldn't have been such a big deal. And if we were still in welfare, I could have extra money, and we could still all get out better. For one, I could possibly still have worked in high school, but significantly less. So I could work on, extracurriculars, or take a sport or something, you know, to work on getting to university eventually. So pretty much all my family at this point struggle with their physical and mental health. I mean, it wears you down when you're poor and you're working your butt off. It wears you down when it's like you're just trying to hold yourself above water all the time. And you just hear all these things like, go back to school, do this, you just need to do that, you just need to do that. It's not that simple when you're poor. It's expensive being poor. So it's hard to get from that point to out of the water. My grandparents are pretty old, and they both have health issues. And nobody in our family can even help them. They can't even really afford hospice. They make too much, apparently. But my grandma's struggling to take care of my grandfather still. She has her own problems. And none of us, not my mother, none of us are there because we're still trying to make it ourselves. My kids have already been affected by the cycle. Being poor often means being vulnerable, being powerless, being afraid, being depressed. Not just sad, no, you're going to be depressed. Because you just keep trying and keep trying, and you just get more tired. I know one thing. If we had $1,000 a month, at this point, my whole family would own a restaurant. We're excellent cooks. My youngest sister is vegan. And we've talked about opening a Mediterranean vegan restaurant. We would do it. If we had $1,000 a month, we would be able to do it, and we would do it. And families can start businesses together with all the adults making $1,000 a month. We wouldn't even have been in that housing. We all could have went to more programs, better schools, better colleges. And it really sucks because a lot of us are very smart in our family. And you just feel like you're wasting so much potential. We would have been safer. We weren't safe. We were vulnerable a lot. There was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of, just a lot of crap. We would probably have been able to actually pay a lawyer to even get, even more money, the child support, alimony. My younger sister and me, we both are artists. I'm pretty sure by now we would have some actual products to sell. Even when she was here living with me for a little while, I couldn't even put $50 together to get a start like a t-shirt thing with her. The the lack of fear of homelessness is a big deal when you're poor. Because you get really scared. That's what you get scared of the most. You get scared of something happening to your car, you not having that money, you not being able to find anybody to help you, somehow losing your job. Could be a variety of things. Maybe you missed too many work days because you had to go to those freaking places and fill out all their forms, and it takes a whole freaking day. And then you have appointments. And then, most of all, if we had $1,000 a month, the community would have been able to help each other more. A lot of us were living right next to each other. And we could barely, like, really have connections. All just trying to make it. I hope this video opened some people's eyes. I understand that some people come from a place where they can't see, and their conclusion is, oh, you just didn't try hard enough. I can't describe the fury I feel when I've worked my butt off and tried to help my family and lost opportunity off of opportunity off of opportunity. When I see all my family's bodies and minds falling apart. And that $1,000 a month would have made the world of difference. We wouldn't be here right now, suffering too young, me and my sisters. And it is that fucking serious. We haven't really been able to get good health care or consistent health care. And when you can't and you have issues, it turns into bigger issues and it doesn't go away.